All right. So I'm going to welcome you to the show, Alison Arngrim. And I want to say that I can't believe you're sitting right here with me, talking to me. I mean, I am such a huge fan. Thank you. Thank you very much. It was just, we're laughing and saying, and everyone's a huge fan now because it's 2024, which is literally the 50th, and that's 50. I was on a show the other day. Someone said, "Did you say 15?" I went, "I wish." No, the 50th, 50, it's anniversary of Little House on the Prairie, started in 74. I am 5,000 years old, apparently. Yes. Well, I am too because we were born in the same
Totally the same.
so we're both the same years and we're 1,000 years old. And Little House on the Prairie, I was just saying to Allison, who played Nellie Olson, if anybody remembers, with the blonde ringlets, the whole thing in the store, always the nasty mean girl. Um, uh, that's her. I literally think that Little House on the Prairie might have saved my life back then because when I was kidnapped in 74, which is when Little House on the Prairie aired, first year, right? That's we're saying 50th anniversary this year in 2024. Can't believe it. That's the year I was kidnapped. And then in 1976, I was kidnapped again. And in between, it was like I had certain things that I watched that gave me an escape, a sense of, I don't know, peace or hope or that everything's gonna be okay that I can't describe really in words. And so to have you here with me today is just like a real honor and a really exciting for me as a fan of yours and of your work too that you have
Thank
done
you.
since then.
And I hear this, I mean, obviously your case is probably the most extreme for me to say, like, I watched when I was kidnapped, but I hear a lot from people say, I was in a horrible situation. My family was not a safe place. It was awful. I had no one to talk to. I've talked to people who said, I was in the hospital. I'd had surgery and couldn't get out of bed for 6 months, was on bed rest. And that's I'd watch. I know people who watch Little House during their chemo infusions and horrendous things. And then I watch Little House at the Prairie. Okay. But that's how people do it. And it's weird to say Little House saved my life. That's actually been a title of several articles of interviews I did Little House because technically people, they sort of like it as a catchy, "Did Little House save your life?" And I go, "Well, yeah, I guess actually it did, because 12 years old when I got the show, and I had been sexually abused from age 6 to, like, age 9, and I was still in this really weird, bizarro, like, life at my house, and I was bullied at school, and I was horribly pathologically shy and just like, ugh, ugh. And I was auditioning for things. I've been working since I was, like, 5. My Screen Actors Guild Cards as member since 1967. Oh my it's crazy. And so I worked, but I was the shy girl, and suddenly I'm the bully fodder. I'm not the bully. I go and I read for this, and I read for Laura and Mary, which is hysterical, but it was like,
Yeah.
Laura, Search for Scarlett O'Hara for 9-year-olds. I
Right.
go back to read
Right.
it, and I get the part. I read for I don't know there's an Nellie Olson, I never read the books, and I read this, and I turn to my father, and I go, "This is not a normal part." He says, "What do you mean?" I said, "This girl's an absolute bitch is what she is." And he says, "Just read it like the way you just read it. Do not touch it, don't move it, don't do anything to it." And I go and I get the part, and suddenly I'm playing this person that everyone's afraid of. I'm playing
Yeah.
the bully. I'm playing the scary person, like, what just happened? And it was fantastic because even a little to this day, if I go into a room full of people I don't know, a party, I'm not sure trying to get my bearings, you want to settle in if you're a little shy. Well, if everyone backs up 3 feet from you when you walk in, and they're intimidated by you, and they don't wanna say anything right away, it buys you time. It gets you, like, an extra 10 minutes to, like, acclimatize to the room and the party, go, "Okay, I feel okay now." It was the strangest thing to have people
Yeah.
intimidated and frightened of me and something I never anticipated, and I was kinda like, "Yay!" And the
Yeah.
characters, I was yelling and screaming and breaking things. All of that anger and rage that was left over and was hanging there, I mean, where does that go? And then you hit adolescence, the worst part after you've been abused, then, like, you're a teenager. And so I'm so angry, and they give me a job where they say, "Break everything in this room. Scream at the top of your lungs, run around, act like a maniac." Like, "Okay." I was so chill. I mean, I have great blood pressure. I went to a health fair when I was in high school, and they were testing blood pressure, and they go, "Do you meditate? Why is your blood pressure so fabulous?" I'm like, "I beat people up all day and scream. It's great." "Yes. Hi."
It's awesome. That's
"Mm,
why.
yeah, yeah."
Well, and it isn't that the truth. I mean, honestly, I've often said, being on stage because I, was on on stage, I always was an actress since I was about 6 years old, and I said, "Saved my life," because that was the one place where I could scream or I could cry or I could, get angry, and, it was just all part of the character. When I couldn't talk, when I wasn't allowed to tell, in my right abuse story, which most children, young people who are abused, they don't talk, they don't tell, they keep their secret because the person that's abusing them is, much older and smarter and wiser and knows how to control them.
And
And
tells them
that's what
crazy,
you
insane shit to make them not tell people.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Can you share any of your crazy, insane shit that made you not tell?
Oh, it's always, you're the one who'll be in trouble.
Yep.
It's always it's not like, "Oh, don't tell anyone because 'cause I'll be in trouble." No, don't tell anyone because you'll be in trouble, and it's like, "Oh, that's actually not how that works." But you don't know. You
Right.
don't know. Everybody does this. This is normal. Really? Then why the part about "you'll kill me if I tell anyone"? If it's completely normal and everyone does it, why are you gonna beat the shit out of me if I tell anybody? Shouldn't that be my first clue? So yeah, it's like contradictory stuff that obviously makes no sense. And I've heard wilder stuff
No.
than that, just crazier stuff than that. I talked to someone recently and I mean, I'll change the story slightly just so you know it, but it had to do with electricity. He got her convinced that he controlled electricity and telephone lines.
Wow.
Really? So, oh, he's everywhere. Oh, he's following me everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
And that's
those
big too.
things work.
I know where you are. I know everything you're doing. I know what you're thinking. I can read your mind. I know what you're thinking. So I know if you've told anyone. I've heard everything from people. But yeah, I just got mostly well, don't tell anyone because they'll beat the crap out of you and et cetera. But also that, oh, no, you'll be in trouble. So
Right. And isn't it interesting because you're 6 years old or you're 9 years old or you're 12 years old, you're those ages where you're so, you're so at the mercy of the adults in in your life, in your home, in your world, and, looking back, I often I get so outraged, I'm like, "How do people do that to innocents? How did this happen, and how does it continue to still be happening at a record-breaking pace?" And that America has an incest problem, and America is the leading buyers of trafficked children, whether it's here in the United States or overseas or my stomach just never settles
oh,
down on.
and we were the leading buyers of child sexual abuse images or child pornography, and now we're the leading producer. We didn't used to be the leading producer, but now we're that too. And
Now we
something
are.
like a third of images trafficked on the internet of child sexual abuse, of images children being sexually abused, are produced by a child's family member or someone living in the household. And that's why at Protect, the thing I'm president of the board of National Association of Protect Children, one of the things we did was the Weiss Center for Child Rescue Technology getting tech to law enforcement, et cetera. And we called it child rescue because the number of times that police and law enforcement told us, the ICAT teams, Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, told us that they would go into a house on a raid, a child porn raid, and oh, that's the kid sitting there on the sofa. I saw, and wind up carrying the victim out of the house, and that this was a
So
common
yeah.
occurrence.
So, yeah, common occurrence, and people still are so, shut down to even considering that this is true, when we absolutely have the numbers.
Go talk to your local police officer. They'll explain it to you. Yes, that's what happens. Yes, that's the thing.
Yeah. So when did you, tell me more about Protect.
When you're on Little House on the Prairie, obviously get approached by all the charities because it's Little House on the Prairie. Everybody calls us. And I would get approached by different charities, and sometimes they were really cool. Or I'd say, that's good, but I don't really have time. Or I go, oh, they don't really have all their ducks in a row. Do they know what they're doing? Is that going to do anything? But on everything, every possible subject. And over the years, I would always attend everything, the Toys for Tots, the Special Olympics. You go to all that stuff. In the '80s, I got very, very involved in HIV/AIDS activism and HIV education because Steve Tracy, who played my husband on Little House, personal, went public with his AIDS diagnosis back in late '85 or late '86. He died of AIDS at age 32, Thanksgiving Day, 1986. And we were really good friends, really, really good friends. And so he'd gone public, and so my phone rings. This is '86. The phone calls I'm getting, or people have no idea. They're asking me. I'm like, why aren't you calling your doctor? You're calling Nellie Olson to ask for medical advice. What is happening?" And so that's when I signed up for the AIDS Project Los Angeles, Southern California AIDS Hotline, where I met my husband, Bob. Lovely, yeah, great story. Um, and so I started doing that, and I became very active. I went all over the country raising money for different smaller AIDS organizations, taught safer everything from safer sex workshops to working the hotline, the food bank, etc. So I was known for talking about things people didn't want to talk about on TV
Right.
and doing these kind of things. So I would get really good calls sent from organizations. And so I get this call. We've been talking about this for a while, but we think we want to do this. And okay. So they said, okay, we're starting this thing, and it's called protect.org, National Association to Protect Children. And we do a bunch of different stuff now. We're talking about like education, all kinds of things. But the initial factor was they said, we're seeing there's a legislative problem. There's this loophole you can drive a truck through. We've got people doing the right thing. We got the social workers are going, yes, this kid's being abused. The cops show up and they police arrest the guy, and he even gets prosecuted, and he even gets found guilty, and even admits, and then goes home with the kid. Wait, wah. And they said, well, in something like 30 odd states, there is an exception in the law, which is literally called the incest exception. And the second people were for it, where you've got so what happened is there were two forms. Well, still there are two forms, still in a lot of states. We got rid of it in 7 states. Um, Two forms. One was what would happen is a defense lawyer would figure out that if they went back and used an 1800s incest law that was to prevent adults from marrying their cousins, they could plead to that, which would be like a misdemeanor or a 1-year thing instead of rape of a child. So instead of, hello, this person sexually assaulted their 4-year-old child, it would be like if someone broke into someone's house and sexually assaulted a grown woman and said, I want to plead guilty to adultery. It was the same kind of legal machination of saying, I want to plead guilty to 1874 definition of incest as if I was dating my 30-year-old cousin, even though what they did was repeatedly abuse their 4-year-old child for like a year. So, kind of insane. Sounds stupid. Like, who would know? They went for this because for prosecutors and judges, you could have a lot of people plead out quickly, clear your court schedule, go play golf. And you could say, I have 100% conviction rate. And none of them served any time, but I have 100% conviction rate. They all pled guilty and went home. And then the second form of it, which was the more insidious, you knowing about this stuff, you know about CAPTA, that in the late 70s, they passed the legislation for people to get state funding if people upped their penalties for child sexual abuse and actually had serious laws. And all the state laws kind of went, and things that had been, rape of a child was 30 days in the county jail up until the 60s.
Yeah.
So there were like no laws. So in the 70s, when they cranked that up and said, okay, yeah, people, this is 10 years and this is 15 years and this could be 20 years and had serious penalties for serious sexual assault crimes. Immediately after, groups of sex offenders, mostly fathers and stepfathers, and their attorneys all went up to Sacramento and to Albany and all the state capitals. But specifically, I had the huge history of Sacramento. We have the 700-page transcript of when they did this. It was a literal thing. There was a 700-page transcript of when this law was passed. And they went in the early 80s with a psychiatrist and said, no, incest offenders are different. We want an exception in the law for fathers or stepfathers that they don't have to go to jail, that they can be immediately remanded to therapy with no time served. And they got it. They passed this. And if you read the transcript, it's like horror. The transcript is horrible. It's like, it reads like a horror movie. You're like, they're literally saying this stuff in front of senators and nobody's saying that's a bad. There's like one guy in the transcript, one senator going, I'm sorry, you just admitted that you did. You said it's only within the family, but it says here while awaiting trial, you molested the child next door. So how then is it? So called them out. Went, this is complete BS that you guys are spouting. But no, they got it through. Well, yes, of course, the shrink who had the center was friends with a senator, and when the law got passed, magically everyone who had court-ordered therapy were all sent to the same guy. How did that happen? So people were in it for the money, and again, there were defense lawyers who said, "Well, that's a good idea because I can just plead my client out." And there were prosecutors, so, not all of them. Most many prosecutors were appalled by this, but there were prosecutors who went, "Okay, now I don't have to sit through the trial. I don't even have to hear about this stuff or deal with it. The guy will just say he's guilty. I say, look, say you're guilty. You don't have to go to jail. We can just all go home." And they did. And we checked the numbers. We pulled DOJ numbers, and it was like 40,000 people had gone free under this law. And many of them, shocker, were reoffended, absolutely. So it was train wreck. And this is just California. This was going on all over the country. She had the 1981 on purpose version and the 1800s accidental version, um, where people could sexually abuse. Also, it was anyone like a relative in the home. So mom's boyfriend, the stepfather, someone staying with the family, a boarder, a relative which just simply happened to be living with them, could use this. There was some guy, wasn't related at all, but I remember his whole story at the trial was he said, "Well, I'm kind of like a grandparent." And of course, as you well know, 80-90% children are sexually abused. It is by a relative or someone close
Yes.
to them or like a relative. So it wasn't the exception. It was, we're going to make a special case for the majority of offenders,
Right.
call it an exception, and they did this. Um, and I was aghast. I was like, I said, little shocked. I can't really say I'm shocked. I'm horrified, but yeah, that figures somebody would do something stupid like that. Okay, so what's the deal? And they said, well, one of the many, many things we want to do is fight this legislatively because people are doing great things. There's all these organizations helping kids. They're doing this. They're doing this. They're doing this. Well, not a lot of people are doing this one. They're not going to the state house. They're not talking to legislators and saying, we'd like to write a
Right.
bill to overturn this law so that people maybe kind of go to jail. And so it was state attorney generals and cops and lawyers and psychiatrists and all these people got together. And when I was initially called, said, would you want to be on the board? The person asking me, our former executive director, he was just given a list. Go ask these people. They're good. And he knew some of them were survivors and some of them were not. And he was so embarrassed because he didn't want to ask, like, "Are you on the list of ones who are actually survivors themselves? What do you say?" And so he was talking to me and hemming and hawing desperately. And I finally said, "You don't skip, I'm on the." Yes, 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 I'm on that list. What I
Survivor list.
literally said to him was, I said, like the old commercial, I'm not just president of the hair club for men, I'm also a member. I said, "Is that what you're trying to ask?" And he was like, "Oh." Um, so he said, "You don't have to talk about what happened to you at all, really. We just like you could be on the letterhead. We really just like a fundraising thing. We're not gonna make you do anything. We're not gonna make." And I said, "Yeah, but if I do this, it is gonna come out. So let me go make
Right.
a couple of calls, make sure I have psychological and legal backup in my fabulous publicist Harlan and my husband Bob and all. I got backup on this if I go crazy and jump in here with both feet." And I did. So I said, "I'll do this."
Yeah.
People sometimes go public with no backup. They don't have someone at home, a friend, a partner, a lawyer, a publicist, somebody where they have backup. They just go cold alone and go public with their story. I think that's extraordinarily dangerous and scary.
Yeah.
I admit I
That's
had
really
full it can be really I admit I had full backup. I had full complemented troops behind me. Um, so I said, "Okay." And initially we didn't think, but we had just changed the law in North Carolina, Arkansas. I know it sounds weird. North Carolina, Arkansas would be first, and Illinois, and this to California. And so it wound up being Senate Bill 33, and it was a long process, and a lot of it's in my book where, yeah, we went and testified in front of the Public Safety Committee, and they said, "No, no, we like the law and we're keeping it." Like, to my face. Yeah.
wow.
It was intense, and it was bizarre, and that's why I was joking about being outed by a senator. I hadn't gone public yet, I hadn't gone on TV yet, I hadn't written the book yet. My friends knew, my husband knew, but I hadn't gone public, and
Right.
but I was, like, introduced, like, I think it was even the day before I would testify. It was the lovely Senator Batten from out in the desert there, just said, and Alison Arngrim, who herself is a survivor of incest and sexual abuse. Just my friend was like, "Well, there you go now. Okay, well then." But I testified along with a doctor and a bunch of cool people, and they said, "Go to hell." Um,
Unbelievable.
it was very distressing for a lot of the other survivors present. It was very distressing for several of our volunteers and staff. who are obviously very personally connected to the issue. And
Course.
I just said, well, now, now they just made me mad. I said, that was a mistake. Now they've pissed me off. Um,
Yeah, do that.
my friend
She
here is
breaks
like,
in.
he's like, he said, they're crying. He says, I feel like going, there's no crying in baseball. What am I don't know what to do. All these people are calling crying. I said, give me the phone. Um, and I said, no, now they've thrown down the gauntlet. Now they've said they're serious. They said they know now they're admitting that this is on purpose, that they enjoy really having this law, wish to keep a law that they know allows people who sexually abuse their children to go free. And it wasn't like lesser cases. It said in print, in print, in print. I had to carry a copy in my purse because people didn't believe me when I'd go to speak to me. I go, really here. In print that it included multiple victims, um, continuous abuse, an assortment of severe acts of abuse, use of child pornography. All of those were included in the crimes that one could receive no jail time and deferred entry of judgment. Then every offense is your first offense? Yes, it was that bad. And they knew it. And they told us to go away. And they were really, really mean to us. And we met several other lobbyists for the opposing side who were extremely mean to us. And I say us, it was a whole group of us, but yeah, they didn't care. I talk about in the book that a woman who worked for a senator said to my face in front of people, I quote, no one in Sacramento gives a shit that you were molested, unquote.
Oh my gosh.
It was in front of people in an office. There were like 8 people in the room. It wasn't like a secret thing.
I just am like, my stomach is just going crazy.
It was horrifying. It was like blew my hair back. And there were so many people in the room who were survivors who were really, I mean, it was just horrible for them. I remember I said, I don't give a shit that you don't give a shit. I was just pitbull. And then I said, okay, well, they don't realize what happens is some people cry. I call my publicist and I called our dear Harlan Bull, our publicist. And he said, well, let me go call my friend over at Larry King, the show, because he'd had so many clients on. He chatted them up.
Yeah.
Next thing I know, I'm in a pre-meeting with a producer. I said, who else should I bring on the show? After she spoke to me, she said, no one. I said, can't I have someone there, just to hold my hand? And she said, well, first of all, you're famous, so they're fine having just you. You're perfectly good at telling the story. And I've never met anyone less in need of hand-holding in my entire life. You're fine. I'm like, I was terrified. Harlan was there. And I went on Larry King Live with Larry King, who was absolutely gracious and marvelous about the whole thing. And Harlan was like standing off to the side behind the camera, ready to lunge onto the stage if something went wrong. I don't know.
Yeah.
Larry was cool. We talked about Little House on the Prairie. We talked about
Yeah.
the law. We talked about what happened to me. And they showed like clips from Sacramento. And he said, tell me what happened. And I told him. And he's like, wait. They said, no, wait, that's insane that there is a law like that. And he said, and he put out the website. It was at www.protect.org and sent the entire world to our website where we had the phone numbers of all of the senators and their email up and their pictures up on the thing. And we crashed the servers and the phones at Sacramento, kind of just a little bit. Yeah, people called. It worked completely. And so I went back to Sacramento and we had the bill reintroduced. We had another bill written and a whole thing. And we got massive support from all sorts of communities. We eventually started hearing from judges, from prosecutors. We had been told the judges like this law. They called us and said, no, not all of us do. Thank you very much. And prosecutors called us and said, no, we don't actually all like this. And we'd like to sign on as being behind you. And I even met a defense lawyer. A defense lawyer said, I don't think it's a good law. I'm a defense lawyer and I think this is a terrible idea. How can I help? It was that bad. And then I had a defense lawyer who was against us, but actually said, in my 25 years, he said this on the radio, in my 25 years of being a defense attorney, working in sexual abuse cases, I have, quote, never had a case where it was not the father. I just, not my words. This man was a 25 years. So, yes, And then we had more people testify, and it turned into like a horrible movie, and it was absolutely insane, the things that went on, and brilliant, brave people who testified. And there were moments like out of a movie where people would show up and announce were testifying, and you'd see the opposition go and like run in circles and become hysterical and panic because we had them dead to rights. And it took a really long time, and there was a whole thing where they shut it down, didn't want to vote in public and stuff. And eventually it did pass. It passed a floor vote. Arnold Schwarzenegger signed it into law. It's an amazing thing. And, so we did pass that. This happened, we did this again in Albany. I went to Albany, and there's still states that have it, but the idea that this is okay seems to have been tamped down. No one was talking about this when I started going on Larry
Right.
King Unusual. I assure you, no one had ever heard of the incest exception. No one was talking about it. There have been a few articles, but like the TV was not talking about it, and people didn't know it was happening. They were aghast that it was happening. So we started hearing from other state senators going, "We'd like to change this in our state before you come over and scare us." And
Yeah.
it made a dent. It made a dent. And the stuff we've done to protect with the child sexual abuse online, with helping the ICAC, Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, helping law enforcement, getting them more funding, that they're going to the government and saying, "You probably should give them more money, not less." Um,
Right.
Getting them better tech,
Or
tr
SARS.
and getting them manpower. We started training, we held Hero Corps, training people who'd come back from Afghanistan and Iraq who were wounded, saying, "Would you like a different job?" Putting them through whole training and apprenticing them out to the police so that they would have more manpower to go arrest people. So, yeah, yay, yes, I actually got to be involved with a group that did stuff like that, and I cannot tell you how happy that makes me. And we're doing new stuff now, everything from arts programs to we're now looking at, well, what's really happening with child labor, the fact that, that child, actors and farm children are completely 100% exempt from all child labor laws. There's so
Possible.
much to do
True.
legally for children
Yeah.
that it is mind-blowing, as you well know. But it is amazing, and we're seeing things now. It's like it's bad enough, okay, child actors, there's protections have been put in piecemeal over the years. But now, of course, we have the whole world of children who are their families are internet influencers, have mommy blogs, whatever. And some of them are all very harmless and sweet and cute, and some of them are not. As we have seen, there are
Right.
people, and there's some people who've gone to jail because they did
Yeah.
really terrible things to their children while having a show on the internet about how great parents they were.
Oh, yeah, we have one right here that lived right
They
here where I live.
handcuffs, they went away, and, it's only scratching the surface of how terrible things are for children on the internet.
And where have we gone wrong? I mean, we talk so much about how, we want, all these protections and education and all of these things for our children, and yet the astronomical numbers still today. Thank God that you've been working on these sorts of laws in the legal system, because it has to start there or there's no consequence for the perpetrator ever. And not just that we want the perpetrators to go away, but then how do we get the resources to those who've been harmed? Because it's a lifelong now sentence. And yet
Yeah,
those that go to jail, they have therapists and they have all these programs for if you're
there's
incarcerated.
money in that.
Billions of dollars on the pr the prisoners and the, prison system, and, like, they allocated, like, $2 million to, like, education and prevention of child abuse and incest, and I'm like, "This can't work. This is back assward." You know?
Everyone says, "Our children are our greatest priority. We love our children. No children of the future." The reality is children do not vote. Children do not make political contributions. Most children, well, they don't pay taxes. I did. Um, but
Yeah.
but most children don't pay taxes, so they're not a constituent. They're not a voter base. If a candidate does something that completely screws over children, what are they going to do about it? Is an elected official going to be unseated? Why would the 4-year-old's going to vote? What are they going to do? You will say, well, the parents. Yes, many parents would indeed vote to protect their children, except for the ones who are selling them into prostitution, having sexual intercourse with them, beating them, selling them on the internet, or doing horrible things to them that they would prefer not to go to jail for, because those people do vote. People who are hurting
Right.
children do vote, and they vote for the guy who's going to make sure they don't go to jail?
Right.
And there's more of them than the people who would like to vote to protect.
So it really does come down to full grown adult people who get this problem and who are out to change things like you and me and others to really raise our voices and to literally come at it from at least certainly from the legal perspective. The big thing for me is to help those who have been harmed heal so that that abuse isn't passed on. And I know with you're a best selling author. What else drove you to publish and to go so public?
I had been, people have been saying, are you going to write a book? Yes, I'm going to write a book. I've been thinking about writing it since I was probably 12 or 13 years old. My life is so bananas being a child actor, my insane family, and all of the weird things that just generally happened to me my whole life. Weird things would happen, and people would turn to me and go, I hope you're writing a book because this is nuts. Please tell me you're taking notes. I am. Good. And even by my early 20s, even my father, who, as a friend said, once someone said to him, "What if she writes a book like Carrie Fisher? You probably won't come off that great." And he's like, "Yes, but it'll be a really great book." Um, Everyone's like, "You please tell me you're going to write a book one day." And I was like, "Yeah, yeah." But it's one of those things. It's time when it's time. And I keep thinking, God, I should have written my book sooner. But no, I didn't have this experience and this, which somehow gave the book like an ending and a middle and a thing. And that it was like time. And what's weird is, okay, so I have my one woman show. It's very, very funny. It's the funny version.
Oh,
And I do that. I'm doing that at the Sierra Madre Playhouse. Plug Sierra Madre Playhouse.
when? It's called Confessions of a Prairie Bitch.
And it starts on
That
the weekend of the 19th, 20th, 21st, and then the next weekend of whatever the heck that is when you add 7. Yeah, the 20th. And so, yeah, the 2 weekends in January coming up there. In fact, we have previews on my birthday, the 18th. So I'm doing that Sierra Madre Playhouse 2 weekends in January. So I was doing this show, and I was in New York doing my show, and I talk about some fairly crazy stuff in it, but it's not very dark. It's a happy show. Uh, but I was doing the show, and this nice man that came to my show happened to be a major literary agent in New York. And it was funny because was it Tommy Chong was having a party, so we all had to leave. And so we didn't get to exchange phone numbers. So he literally hit me up on Facebook. And like,
wow.
and he said, "Is there a book to go with this show?" There could be. Everyone else, they do their one woman show based on their book. I did the show and then the book. So he said the book, and so we talked, and I said, "What do I need?" And he said, "Do you have 4 chapters?" I had been writing. I had exactly 4 chapters of it.
Oh my
Funny you should ask. And I sent him 4 chapters and the outline and went, "What do you think?" And he said, "I just already sent it to several publishers just now. Are you kidding me?" So he made up a little package, put a picture and a thing on it, and sent it out. And I'm like, "You sent it out? Oh, good God." And he said, "No, this is what we're looking for." Okay. So I remember it was a few weeks later, I'm on the train coming down from like Rochester to New York. And he said, "Oh, I've got some meetings set up with publishers." And I said, "Oh, great." And I'm waiting to hear some little boutique publisher. He's funny. He's like, says, "Yeah, Simon and Schuster, HarperCollins, Crown." And So next thing I know, I'm sitting in the offices of all these publishers, and they said, and the thing was, they said, "Is the whole book written like this?" And I said, "Yeah, it's how I write." They're like, "Good." And there's like a bidding war, and I wound up with a beautiful HarperCollins, who, of course, are the publishers of the Little House Prairie books, which makes it all so weird. So they loved it, and I talk about everything. I talk about my crazy childhood and growing up in Hollywood. I talk about what it was like on the set every day of Little House on the Prairie and how fabulous that was. And I absolutely talk about being abused and how terrible I felt and how I was shy at school. And then I talk about going to therapy in my early 20s and how, that I knew I was in trouble when she looked at me after I spoke to her for a few minutes and said, "Can you come in 3 times a week?" I said, "It's that bad." It's yes, yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm that messed up. Yeah, pretty much. I was so excited when she said you can come in once a week. I was like, so
Oh, you got to that point.
I
That's
did.
good.
I did.
Yeah,
And
this is bad.
some 20 years of therapy and 3 shrinks later, I had a therapist say, you don't have to come in." I said, "What?" She said, "Well, you're coming to me with normal people problems. These are normal problems, you're telling me. And then when you come in, you say you have a problem, you say, well, I had a problem, and then I tried this, and then I tried that, and I did that, and then I resolved it. He says, that's pretty much it. That's life.
Yeah.
Things come up, they're bad, you deal with them, you fix them, it's the next day. And she said, that's just really kind of what we're trying to get to.
You're there. You made it. You made it, Alice. You got there.
Are you going to tell people? I said, can I get a note saying I'm sane? And she said, oh, no, I'm not going that far. But I was told that I was functional enough that I did not have to come in regularly. If something came up, I was welcome to drop in, which is amazing. It's amazing because I was absolutely a mess in my early 20s. I wrote about that. I wrote about everything. I wrote about my first marriage. I wrote about meeting Bob. And I wrote about Steve dying, about my aunt dying. I wrote about the death of both my parents. I wrote everything. And I wrote about being there in Sacramento and having these people say terrible things to me. And I wrote about the bizarre, surreal experience of sitting there with Larry King, like barely 2.5 feet from my nose across the table, asking me all these really weird questions, answering them on television, and having Larry King, like, literally right before we'd start, say, look, I'm kind of the voice of the audience, so I'm going to ask you questions that might sound stupid. If I ask you something weird or that we already talked about, we're not even discussing, don't freak. I know that. I didn't forget. Just tell me you don't want to answer the question that go on. He says, but if I don't ask it, it'll look weird. And I went, oh my God, you're right. You're completely right. And he said, and if you want to stop at any time, you need to drink water. You need to, you okay? And absolutely solicitous of my well-being and and it was a great interview. And then he also said, and I said, we talk about the law. I said, I know what you want. You want to talk about the law and the thing. So we're doing that.
Ugh, that's so great. I have a question that I want to ask you, and
Please.
just like blowing off.
I could blow you off.
Say, I'm not talking about that, but I'm going to ask anyway. What was your relationship like with your mother in this whole crazy? What was her part?
Is this as my father put it, there's negligence and there's gross negligence. And I guess we're guilty of gross negligence. They weren't paying attention to things they should have been paying attention to. The, I guess, excuse that could be made is, yes, in the early 60s, there were no ABC after school specials. Hell, there were barely laws. There were certainly no brochures saying what to look for if your child's being abused. So people went, I don't know, she's made trouble at school. If you didn't actually go to your parents and tell them, and they were guessing in 1968, 1969, they didn't all guess that. That's not what they
No, they would never have guessed that. My parents never would have guessed. That was just not it wasn't even in our consciousness.
And the impetus was to not guess that. Like, if you were guessing that, it's like, no, 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 put that out of your mind. It can't be that. So they were living in that universe, and everybody was, people were drinking a lot, and everyone was kind of nuts and distracted and really not paying attention to stuff. And yes, in retrospect, and at the time when I talked to my parents, as I said, back in like my 20s, they both even said, hindsight 2020. They said, were we blind? Were we stupid? It's not like by today's standards, it's not insanely obvious what was happening. But at the time, it was like, and they didn't get it, and they did not pay attention. When I have an enormous advantage because I know a lot of my friends didn't get this. When I confronted my parents, they absolutely believed me. They didn't say, oh, no, it was fine, or that's okay, or that didn't happen. My mother was literally, her first words were, oh, shit. I mean, no. So they got it, that it happened, that it was a terrible thing, and that they had screwed up.
And interesting for me, because I get asked these questions about my parents, this kind of a question. That's why I wanted to ask somebody else, because I thought your answer might be similar to my own. Like, for me, I wasn't neglected. My parents were very present in my life, but they were all in those other ways, just really didn't know. And people can't get that in 2020.
And for what I've read of the story, this guy was targeting your whole family. He was manipulating. It was basically a cult around this dude was happening in your house, where everyone was just like, yes, let's all follow this dude. And that happens a lot.
they just groom everybody. They get everybody in a place of trust. I mean, they do it, individuals so that nobody's paying attention because what I'm going to do over here to this child, I have to have everybody's trust so that nobody would ever suspect me and they'll
Yeah.
always believe me and all of that.
It reads
Yeah.
like he not only manipulated them and had them so completely confused, they didn't know where to look, but that he also put them both also in compromising positions. So what were they gonna say?
Yes.
Oh, I gotta
Right.
call the cops about what he's doing to her. And they're gonna go, and yeah, and what else is he doing? Oh, that. Yeah. And that's the thing, is the parents get put in a compromising position. Parents get compromise the people around the child in some way. So that
Yep.
they feel like they can't. They're in the same, the kid feels like they can't go to the police. Suddenly the parents feel like they can't go to the police. And that's a
Oh,
pretty
yeah.
clever trick.
It's a really good trick and it works. That's the thing, and it works still today. And that's where grooming and the conversation around that has become such an important one for me. So were you groomed or was it just I'll beat the shit out of you and that was enough to keep you quiet? I mean, was this person a person of trust?
Yeah, I was left alone all the time. I mean, parents' ideas of a babysitter was who's available and preferably doesn't cost anything. Um, um, I actually I made a joke about this once, but it's completely true. I said 3 out of 4 of my babysitters spent time in, like, state mental hospitals, and
Wow.
that's actually not completely a joke. I actually did have other people who were my babysitters who later were committed for various mental illnesses, like, serious, like that. So it's like, so is everyone who babysat absolutely mad? Most of them, they had severe problems. Severe problems. I don't know. Trying to think if there's anybody who was, like, boring or normal or didn't have major psychological issues who babysat me, and I can come up with maybe, like, 2 or 3 people. Um,
Yeah.
so it was pretty bad. So, yes, of course, yes, absolutely family members, and they were just like, they knew this person took drugs. Everybody took drugs. It's the 1960s. They knew that this person had issues. They knew, eh, and there was a lot of isolation. There was a lot of isolation of being left alone for ridiculous periods of times and grown-ups not around stuff. And
Yeah.
so, yes, absolutely groomed. And there was that culty thing of telling people what they want to hear. As it was my older brother, very good at telling people what they wanted to hear. So they were hearing what they wanted to hear. So this person is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And that's the thing,
Yeah.
is they will get people nearby. They'll give them something they want out of it so that they join
Yep.
the weird little culty parade that follows them around everywhere and thinks they're fine and doesn't question what they're doing.
And when there's laws that then, I mean, this is back in the late 60s, early 70s when still there were no real, truly there were no child abuse laws. There
Very
just
penny
weren't.
ante
They didn't exist.
sentences, very,
Yeah,
yeah.
whatever it was.
And it was like cops didn't
Yeah,
wanna get involved kinda thing. It was, well, it's a
right.
lot
This
where
is a family problem.
a lot of the domestic violence battering stuff would just, we'll just have him walk around the block and calm down. I mean, if they were bad for that, you can imagine what they were for kids. It was,
Right. Yeah, exactly. Just thinking of all the different things in your entertainment media career that you have had and all along the way after your 20s, after they sent you the note from the principal's office, she can walk the halls. She's okay.
just barely.
Barbara's like, "Get out.
Yeah, yeah.
Get out of here.
Yeah, I
Go
can't
ahead.
listen
You
to
know how
this
to solve real
anymore."
life problems. You'll
Yeah.
have them. You'll be okay." So anyway, after that, as an advocate,
And that took well into my 30s. I think 23 years of therapy.
23 years,
Yes.
but honestly, that me too. It was like I was at 30, I was like, I think I want to tell my story someday, and I wanna help people know that the person that's gonna hurt your kids is somebody you already know and love and trust.
Thank you.
Please,
It's
can I say that?
Yeah, it is. It's someone you know, and the therapy I just be clear, I did everything. Individual therapy, group therapy, 12-step programs, incest survivors, everything. I even once there was an this episode. I tried to have fun with these things. There was an ad, and it was a therapist, and she was doing a paper, a study, and she wanted to interview and do a therapy group with quote quote high functioning women who'd been sexually abused between the ages of blah blah blah, but were quote high functioning. You weren't in the hospital this week or anything, and
Okay.
you had a job.
That's high fun.
You could operate a
Okay.
fork without assistance. And, I was great, and the deal was if you went to one session and you filled out some forms and you had a session with her and you met the other people and you got a free lottery ticket.
That was your pay.
Yes, it was it's a session,
Your reward.
and it was yeah, and you could stay and go to a couple of sessions, you could be with the group a couple times, meet some other lovely people who had the same thing happen, and you got a lottery ticket. And I was like, "Yes." I went. I didn't win anything. I didn't gain numbers of lottery ticket, but I thought, how funny would it have been if I'd won?
Oh my god.
How hilarious would that have been if I'd gone to an incest therapy group and won, like, $10,000,000? I don't know if I'd have ever stopped laughing, but, I met lovely people. The other women in the group were marvelous, and I was glad I went and got to talk to them and everything, and she was very good. She did a couple of I just did, like, 2 sessions and met all these lovely people and got, like, free lottery ticket. Got it. I don't know if anyone won, but we all enjoyed it.
Well, obviously, Allison, you have used humor or you have developed a sense of humor or you were born this way because that is a huge kind of a gift that not everyone has that. And when you do, I was raised by a father who was very funny and had all these funny sayings, and we were always laughing in my home, which I believe was a really important piece of my surviving, what we go through. And how do you, with your show even, I mean, just the name of your one woman show, you know, I just can't get over it. I'm like, I'm gonna come to Sierra
Well, thank
Madre and see your show and meet you in person.
well, it's
If I could make it happen, I would.
as one of my
I
therapists said, she said, "Yeah, absolutely, you are using humor as a defense mechanism, but who the hell ever said you're not allowed to defend yourself?" I
Right.
said, "Oh, that's very nice." She said, "Right." She says, "Then, yeah, people are way too hard on defense mechanisms. What, you're not allowed to defend yourself? You're not allowed to have some kind of tools to get through life and make yourself feel a little bit better?" There's a lot of defense mechanisms and coping strategies like drugs, alcohol, self-harm, cutting, being horrible to people, acting out, dissociating. You're making fun of the whole thing. That's the worst thing you're doing is you make jokes about really inappropriate things. There's a lot worse things you could be doing to get through the day, defend yourself, and we're gonna go with that one then.
Yeah, and I love that because honestly, it's true. There has to come a point in time where, that trite little phrase, "Laughter is the best medicine," is fortunately actually true. There is so much truth in that, and so I love that this is your personality and what you either came with or developed, and I just hope that people understand that it is okay to defend yourself and to defend yourself by laughing your way through, making, inappropriate jokes about what happened or whatever. If that helps you get through the day and solve a problem that might be in your life now, that's all that adulting and being a human being is. And then if you stand up for other people like you have, and I was introduced to you through your friend Pamela Bob.
Hey, Pamela
She
Bob.
wrote into
Hey, Pamela.
yeah.
We love Pamela Bob.
So thank you to friends. That's probably played a very important part in your life, as you've already mentioned a few
And
people.
being
I wanted to mention her.
curious things about things in general, we read about, a lot about people who survived the Holocaust, for instance, and there's a lot of very interesting books
Yeah.
to survivors. And there was a guy who wrote a really detailed book, about the camps and everything. And one of the things he said he saw how when he was there, friends of his who survived, who didn't survive, all that he said, it was so mind blowing because people who you knew in regular life before who were so tough. And you said, well, that's so this guy's gonna make it. You give him the first day, well, he'll do. And he says, and the poor guy was, dead in 2 weeks. And he says, and then the guy down the street, he thought, well, he'll fold day one, made it out. Like years later, like, how in the world? He said, so it's not the normal like survival mechanisms you think would. And he made a list of things that were actually markers of survivors, and it kind of yes crosses over to other PTSD things. But sense of humor was absolutely on top of
That's
the list.
it.
Adaptability to different situations, a whole series of, but sense of humor, even weird sense of humor was a huge, huge survival factor. And I thought, well, that's good to know. Um, and yeah, I was raised with the fight, but when I realized, as my therapist said, no, it's actually okay. It's laugh. It's kind of good for you. Um, and so I have absolutely used that. And then my show too is about the whole. You've seen what's happened to so many ex-child stars, as we say, former child actors.
Sure.
It's very difficult. Many of them are abused. Many of them are abused by being put in showbiz, and they didn't want to act. They didn't want to be on a television show, and their parents literally forced them. They begged their parents to not make them do this again and go to other movies, and they made them. It's just awful stories. Many terrible stories, like the marvelous woman who played Kitty on Father Knows Best, who's been very public, where the parents are sexually abusing them as well as selling them out
Right.
in the industry. Horrible stuff. So obviously, for a lot of them, it's a really bad experience. And in my case, being a Little House was fantastic, but because of the character I played, I absolutely had people yell things, call me a bitch to my face, and throw things at me in the Hollywood Christmas parade and treat me very strangely. And I don't know what I'd have done if I didn't have a sense of humor, or if I'd been really, really young when I started the show. I would have been awful. If I would have thought, oh, they really hate me. But it's at least 12, so I could go, no, they hate her.
Yeah.
But I've definitely found the whole syndrome of being typecast and people thinking I'm really a bitch and all that to be screamingly funny over the years. And so that's how this show kind of became a thing out of the stand I was doing, going,
Yeah.
yes, actually, everyone does hate me. Thank you. And how like weird the whole thing of being famous when you're
Yeah.
12 is, and having people hate you. And what does this mean? And like, why? And it became a show, and then became a book.
Yeah. That's amazing. And is your book, what's the title of your book?
Confessions of a Prairie Bitch: How I Survived Nellie Olson and Learned to Love Being Hated.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Because it's a long title, and I know it had something to do with how I survived.
And it got everything in this. And Pamela Bob, she did this thing, Living on a Prairie, where she made this
Yeah, I was
comedy.
just going to ask you about that. She's also an actress.
Right, so I
Right.
met her in New York, and she got us into a show, and everything. So then she says, I'm really, really, really into Little House on the Prairie. And then she did an impression of Melissa Gilbert at the lunch table that was so good
Oh,
that I taped it with my phone and sent it to Melissa. And then she says, I'm writing this thing, and she sends me the script. Well, I proceed to laugh my ass off. And it's this whole thing of a woman who's so obsessed with Little House on the Prairie that she's not really functional. She can't hold down a job or have a relationship, like a mess.
she's living on a prairie. That's the
Living on a prairie in her mind, and everything has to do with Little House on the Prairie. And her friends are like, "You've got to stop." And finally, I play her life coach slash therapist, which is
all about.
particularly hilarious under all the circumstances. So yeah, so no, we love Pamela Bob.
I love that. And, I have a little connection to Little House on the Prairie that's a little personal too. When I was kidnapped the second time, my abductor put me at Flint Ridge Sacred Heart Academy in Pasadena, California. And Melissa Sue Anderson was also at that school. And I met her a couple of times, sat at the table with her, and then she'd be off filming.
They were all the same age, and that's right. She went to the Catholic school.
And she really did have the most porcelain skin, and her eyes,
Steely blue eyes, were like there's just
but light. It was
they were like translucent. Yeah,
yeah.
it looked like she was wearing contact lenses. It didn't look real. It was like amazing.
No, I would look at her eyes and I would think, are those her real eyes? Did they fix her eyes to look like that?
Well, and then here's how
I'm always
how many parents would say, my child is enrolled in a prestigious, private, religious, no less, religious school. How could anybody be abusing her? She is literally all day long at this fabulous, safe girls' school run by nuns. What could get, and in the middle of this, you're being taken back and forth by your kidnapper.
oh yeah, he's coming in and out, picking me up on the weekends to do his dirty work, and then
Did he like enroll you then? No. Wait, did he like pick the school?
oh, he enrolled me and he went to the job
In a religious private school.
Yeah, that I was his daughter, and that he was a CIA agent, and they had to make sure that that if people came looking for me, that we had escaped the Lebanon crisis that was going on, and my mother had been killed, and that these nuns were going to be, they were going to protect me and make sure that they, never disclosed that I was at this school. So it took the FBI and the private investigator that my parents had hired more than one time going to this school
again,
when they narrowed it down.
He had another
find me.
great cockamamie story that he told them. Oh, You're with me in my little cult. See, you're
Yeah.
helping me and the CIA and
Yeah.
and they bought it.
That is
And they
why the
freaking bought it.
hey, people are still buying this crap because the person that tells you first wins. So if you want your kids to understand grooming and sex and all those things, you better be the first person that is talking and opening up conversations that you never thought you'd have to
You
have or
cannot
not this
have that
young.
conversation too early.
Have to do it young.
It
Yeah.
totally can be age appropriate, like the thing people do now where they tell very little children, like, your body parts are your body parts, and, nobody else is supposed to be in your underwear. Hi. Even that, even that would have been
Yeah.
more ammo than I had as a child because people didn't sit their children down and say, "Oh, by the way, somebody might want to tell you to take all your clothes off. Don't do it." If somebody weird comes to you that even and says, "No, really, we should go in the other room and you should take off all your clothes and let me say no because you don't have to let them do that." Had anyone even said that to me beforehand,
Yes.
things would have gone differently.
Yeah, and the thing is that when we don't say anything, then that young person really truly has no way to navigate, "Is this okay? Is this not okay? It doesn't feel
Or
good. I
literally,
don't
what is
like it.
even
Maybe
happening?
this is what
Yeah.
every kid this is how life is." That's
Yeah,
what you
and
described.
if you don't
Like,
have
this is what
any
it is.
sexual information, you literally at that point, you're young enough where you may not even know what sex is, and this is the first you're hearing of it, is under
Yes.
these circumstances, how are you gonna know what to tell people? What is it that I would have even told people? He's making you do
Mm,
what? I'm not really sure, but it's, when you have 0 info, what and
right.
that's the thing, and then they have I actually at some point in my book, I actually said something about this. People believe what they wanna believe, and they will believe what they think they're seeing. It is amazing how often that happens, and I have seen time and time again. I mean, sometimes it's been, as I said, to my advantage when I pretended not to be shy. The day I said, "I'm gonna just literally have to pretend not to be shy." I read about famous people like Bette Midler who were terribly shy as children, and so I called it the Bette Midler School of Overcompensation, and, but it worked because even though I was completely faking initially, people believe what they wanna believe, and they wanted to believe
Yep.
that I had somehow miraculously overnight become not shy.
Isn't that funny? 'Cause I actually people don't believe this, but I actually was a little bit shy too. I look back on my little childhood pictures, and I'm always standing back a little bit behind my sisters, a little bit behind Karen or Susan, and it's funny because nobody remembers me as being shy at all, but I knew from the time I was 6 years old and begged to go audition for The Sound of Music, which was our community university summer musical at the university. They do one, the community university thing every year, and I got the part as little Gretel,
Oh,
and I never quit after that.
right?
And so that was in me, but my shyness with people just was overcome because I had to, and I was always participating with the grown-ups, which also is something that you have to watch out for with your kids.
It spends way more time with
Please
grown-ups. That's why. Yeah.
Yeah, and because you wanna please them, because you want them to be happy with you, because that was a big thing. If I was gonna act, I was gonna stay awake at notes after the practice, and I was gonna write them down even though I'm 7 years old. I'm gonna do it right,
This was
and
the screwed up thing
people
is
pleasers.
why what people say is being put in not just much acting, but being put in show business as a kid, similar to being sexually abused. You go, well, that's terrible. Not all children are business, but there are unfortunately some bad psychological similarities. You are thrown into a situation where you're relating primarily to adults, not children your own age. We're very lucky at Little House had a whole bunch of people
Right.
my own age. Dodge bullet there. You're dealing with a lot of people,
Goodness.
and you're being put in a situation where you're having to perform at an adult level and perform adult things. You're competing essentially with other adults. You're being made into so as a child actor, you're responsible for the employment of other people. You have a job. You have to show up. You have learning lines. And in our case, we were treated with appropriate respect on Little House, which is really nice. We treated, like respectfully as actors, even the
So
kids.
that's nice to hear.
I think that's why
I'm glad that
we're, like, have our heads together, most of us, because we were treated respectfully, we weren't treated like little trained animals, we were treated as actors, and I went, "Well, thank God, at least we had that going." But a lot of
yeah.
times it is, Just like when a child is forced into a sexual relationship with a grown person, a post-puberty grown person, they can never win because they're not an
Mm.
adult. They can't
No,
they cannot
they're
they
outmatched.
can't deliver really what an adult woman would be. So they're losing from the get-go and put in this weird situation where they're expected to perform like an adult. It's gross, but that's what
Right,
it
and
is.
that natural development, so arrested development is a real thing because now you're all of a sudden you skipped over this whole other thing and trying to be something out here that you're completely unprepared for. You're mentally not able to you miss out on all these other steps, which is why we're a mess.
If you couple with that you're filing an income tax return at 12 and you have a checking
Yes.
account and a savings account and a trust fund and you have your own apartment at 17 and you own a condominium at 18 and you're having a midlife crisis at 19. Um, yeah. That's
What happened to being, 6 to 14, you know?
whoosh. And
It
if you put the 2 together, that this,
yeah.
like, huge jumps, yes, it seriously messes with your head. It's bound to. And so that's why you do see some people who are if especially if they were forced into the business and didn't wanna be, and if there was abuse on top of that, you go, "Wow, why are these people all taking a lot of drugs and hurting themselves and so unhappy?" 'Cause yeah.
Yeah. There's a reason. And so as we come kind of wrapping up our conversation today, I just wondered, what are your future plans? I know you've got the shows, you've got projects, you're advocate, protect, you've got all kinds of things going. We want to buy tickets. We want to know how to do that and buy your book. And we want to support you in what you're doing. And we want you to support us in the same way because we're all trying to make an impact in this particular thing that is a worldwide crisis. It is a pandemic like none other.
It's a
The abuse,
and,
assault,
oh,
rape, and incest of children.
did it ever get worse in the pandemic? Oh, the children are now all locked in the house with their abuser and not even going to school for 6 hours a day. Okay, so I'm everywhere. I'm on Facebook. I'm Alison Arngrim. I'm on Instagram. I'm Alison Arngrim everywhere. The book, of course, you can get it on Amazon, Confessions of Prairie Bitch. Yes, the Sierra Madre Playhouse. If you go to their website, you'll see all the stuff for our January shows, and I've got it all up on Facebook and everything. I have an online show on stageit.com on January 14th that I will be performing there, right over there in my living room that you can tune into. It's a little
Okay.
mini show, just a little mini show, like a preview thing. And then in February, I'm in St. Louis at a working women's conference at St. Louis, the Working Women's Conference, and that's up on my site and everything. My website is bonnetheads.com.
Bonnet heads with two N's,
It's
everybody.
BONNETS, HEAT, bonnetheads.com. And I have a newsletter. You can sign up for the Nellie newsletter. Get a newsletter once a month, tells you where I am. After I do St. Louis, I go to France. I'm doing 3 shows in France. Yes, in French. And then it's the great Simi Valley, the Simi Valley 50th anniversary reunion of like the entire cast in the place where we filmed the show the whole March 23rd weekend. It's huge. And then we're going to Kentucky. I'm going to Patty's 1800s in Kentucky. And then there's the Cherry Blossom Festival in Missouri, and then this goes on all year. We wind up, I think, November in Branson, but there's cast, reunions, and then I do my comedy show in Chicago, New York, and several other places. But the whole schedule is on my Facebook page, my website, and in the newsletter. So, please, I don't know, as they used to say, "Google me, bitch," was the line he said. But yes, if you Google me, I am everywhere, and I will probably be
Okay.
near your town, somewhere, wherever you are. I will be near your town at some point. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Oh my gosh. Well, people out there are going to be racing to get their tickets to come and see. Are there live events in Simi Valley where you're meeting with the
Oh
public?
god, yeah.
Or are they?
Pretty much the whole cast is coming. Really, we've heard from a lot of people. We've heard from people who don't even do events are going, "Yeah, I'm coming to this." And we're gonna have autograph signing and sell swag, and there's gonna be meet and greets, and there's gonna be panel discussions, and then they're actually gonna have buses. You can get on a little bus and go up to the place where we filmed the show, and they're recreating the sets, and it's insane. It's insane. So, yeah, yeah.
Well, I have a cousin in Simi Valley, so I better.
You got a place to stay.
No,
Come on down.
yep.
Come
No,
on
we're coming.
over. Yes.
This has been an absolute delight, and it's also been eye-opening. Heart My heart is smiling, and my heart also goes out to you for what you've been through.
Thank you.
I
Ditto.
understand you
Ditto. Ditto.
as a survivor, as a woman. as somebody who's gone through those ups and downs, and yet laughter and resilience and courage. I see all of that in you, and I thank you so much, Allison, for being on the show and
Thank
giving
you.
others some hope, courage to know that they too can move forward and that they're not alone. You're amazing. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.